I, Major Anya Sharma, 32 years old, a seasoned naval systems engineer forged in the crucible of dedication and technical precision, once believed I understood the very essence of integrity, of commitment. I thought I knew what it meant to earn your stripes, whether on a uniform or in life. But that night, at the Entrepreneur of the Year Gala in San Diego, a city I'd come to call home between deployments, where my family ought to have swelled with pride, I discovered those values weren't just overlooked, they were desecrated. The air in the ballroom, thick with the scent of expensive perfume, stale champagne, and the cloying aroma of ambition, pressed down on me like 100 fathoms of water. It was a stark contrast to the clean, bracing salt air of the Pacific, or the acrid tang of diesel fuel in a submarine's engine room, places where reality had no filter. Here, reality was a carefully constructed facade. Crystal chandeliers twinkled above, reflecting off tailored suits and sparkling gowns, a world away from the gritty, honest work that kept the fleet afloat. I'd traded my service dress blues for a cocktail dress, feeling like a stranger in my own skin, a fish out of water, or perhaps a submariner surfacing in a desert. Tonight, every single spotlight, every hushed whisper of admiration, every camera flash, belonged to my older brother, Leo. He stood on the raised platform, bathed in the glow, accepting the award for breakthrough solutions in marine repair industry. Breakthrough solutions. The words echoed in my head, a hollow, mocking laugh track. My parents, beaming from a table near the front, looked like they'd won the lottery, their gazes fixed on their golden boy. My mother dabbed a tear from the corner of her eye, while my father clapped with an almost desperate enthusiasm. It should have been a moment of shared triumph, a celebration of family success. Instead, it felt like a cold, calculating betrayal, a knife twisted slowly in a wound I hadn't even realized was open. I navigated the labyrinth of tables, a forced smile plastered on my face, my internal compass spinning wildly. The clinking of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation felt like noise, a distraction from the growing storm inside me. When I finally reached him, just as he was stepping down from the stage, clutching the heavy, gleaming trophy, I extended my hand, trying to offer a genuine congratulations. That was quite a speech, Leo, I managed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He turned, his smile slick and devoid of warmth, like the oil sheen on calm water. His eyes, usually a reflection of my own, held a predatory glint I'd never noticed before. Ah, our little sister Anya. Still busy with those government warships, aren't you? Always tinkering with engines, playing with the big boys' toys. He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves like sand in a gear. He glanced around at the small cluster of admirers still lingering, waiting for their turn to congratulate him, clearly playing to his audience. Not like me, having to build an empire from scratch, with my own two hands and my own brilliant ideas. The last phrase was punctuated with a slight emphasis, a subtle but unmistakable jab aimed directly at me. His words hit me harder than any rogue wave I'd ever encountered at sea, colder than the deepest trench, more piercing than the shriek of an alarm during a system failure. They weren't just an insult, they were an erasure. A public, theatrical obliteration of my contributions. The people around us, oblivious to the undercurrent of malice, laughed politely, a chorus of sheep following their shepherd. They had no idea, absolutely no clue, that Leo's so-called empire was constructed entirely on the sweat, the intellectual property, and the meticulous engineering designs I had consulted on free of charge, I might add, for the better part of 4 years. 4 years of late-night calls from the base, sketching out schematics on whatever scrap paper I could find, poring over his fledgling business plans during my precious shore leave, offering advice rooted in years of rigorous training and practical application in the most demanding environments on the planet. I had given him the blueprints, the very foundations of his breakthrough solutions, out of familial loyalty, out of a naive belief in shared success. This wasn't a party, I realized, my blood turning to ice. This was a meticulously staged play, a grand deception, and I was merely a prop, a convenient, easily dismissed character in his carefully crafted narrative of self-made genius. The air suddenly felt too thin, my lungs burning as if I'd been holding my breath for an eternity. I took a deep, measured breath, the same methodical technique I'd learned to employ when facing sudden danger deep below the surface, when the pressure threatened to crush not just the hull, but your very resolve. It was the breath of a woman preparing for battle, not a gala. The lights, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all of it faded, replaced by a cold, clear clarity. My world, which I thought was built on logic and hard facts, had just tilted on its axis. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, a desecration of everything I stood for. If you've ever poured your blood, sweat, and tears into something, sacrificed your time and expertise, only to be treated like an afterthought, a failure, or worse, a ghost whose labor was stolen and claimed by another, then you understand this ache, this burning indignation. Tell me where you're from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what you're about to witness is not just a story, it's a meticulously planned, strategically executed overthrow, a reckoning they never saw coming. And trust me, when an engineer like me decides to dismantle something, I leave no bolt unturned, no system unexposed. This was just the prologue. The main engine was about to ignite. 4 years back, the silence of Naval Air Station North Island, Coronado, at that hour was always deceptive. It was well past 2 in the morning, a time when the vast, sprawling base settled into a hushed rhythm, punctuated only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional security patrol. My world, however, was still wide awake, illuminated by the harsh glare of my desk lamp in the engineering bay. I was neck deep in schematics, the air thick with the metallic tang of hydraulic fluid, the faint scent of ozone from the humming server racks, and the ever-present aroma of stale coffee. Technical papers, dense with equations and intricate diagrams, lay scattered across my workstation like fallen leaves. This was my sanctuary, a place where the rigid logic of engineering offered a refuge from the messy complexities of life outside the base gates. The jarring ring of the secure landline, the one meant for official communications, shattered that fragile peace. My heart immediately slammed against my ribs. Calls at this ungodly hour rarely brought tidings of good fortune. Usually, it meant a critical system failure aboard a destroyer out at sea, a last-minute modification request for a transport plane before deployment, or a drill simulation spiraling into a real-world scramble. But the caller ID flashed a number from the outside, a familiar sequence that twisted a knot of dread in my gut. It was Leo. My older brother, Leo, the self-proclaimed captain of Petrova Marine. His voice, typically a booming cannonade of confidence, and the kind of swagger reserved for a man who believed he held the reins to destiny, was now a ragged, barely coherent whisper. It was an unfamiliar sound, fragile, and laced with a terror that clawed at my composure. "Anya," he rasped, his voice catching, a raw, desperate sound. "They're going to shut us down!" I gripped the receiver, my knuckles white, a cold wave washing over me. "Julio, what in the hell are you talking about? The shop! Anya! Our shop!" he stammered, the careful edifice of his business acumen crumbling into dust. The biggest Navy contract we've ever landed, the one for the USS Triton patrol boat's navigation system, it's gone south. Completely. He spiraled into a frantic monologue, painting a grim tableau of our family's boatyard being boarded up, the tools silenced, the legacy extinguished. Months ago, he'd charmed the Navy brass with promises of an advanced navigational upgrade for the Triton a crucial vessel for coastal patrols. He'd boasted he could seamlessly integrate cutting-edge GPS and sonar tech into her antiquated systems, a feat even I knew was a monumental engineering challenge. But Leo, always one for the grand vision, never possessed the meticulous discipline required to execute the finer points. He was a salesman, a charismatic storyteller, not an engineer. And now, he admitted, he was hopelessly out of his depth. "I can't make it work, Anya," he confessed, his voice dropping to a near sob. "The old wiring, the power supply limitations, the proprietary software, it's a nightmare. If we lose this contract, Anya, it's over. Every last dime will vanish. Dad's legacy, the good name he built, The trust the Navy placed in Petrova Marine for over 30 years, it all goes down the drain because of my failure. His words struck a deeply personal chord, resonating with a familiar ache. Our father, Captain Elias Petrova, a man forged in the crucible of Navy service, had poured his very soul into that boatyard. It wasn't just a business. It was an extension of his naval career, a testament to his unwavering commitment to maritime excellence. His sudden passing had left a void that Leo, for all his ambition, had struggled to fill. Now, Leo wasn't just begging for technical assistance. He was wielding the ghost of our father, using his memory as a weapon against my resolve. He was touching the very bedrock of my existence, my honor as an officer, my loyalty to the uniform, and the deeply ingrained family pride that ran in my veins. "This isn't about money, Anya," he pleaded, his voice thick with a desperation that twisted my gut. "This is about saving face, about keeping our word to the Navy. It's about preserving the reputation Dad built, the one he passed down to us. If we fail them on this, our name will be mud across every base from here to Puget Sound. We'll never get another Navy contract again. It's a matter of professional respect, of trust." He knew my weaknesses, knew exactly how to dismantle my defenses. Duty, family, honor, the pillars of my military and personal life. He was dangling the very foundation of my identity, knowing I would be compelled to act. "Just give me a preliminary design, a rough outline, something to show them we're on the right track. To buy us some time," he implored, his voice a frantic gasp for air. "Just to hold them off. This once, I swear, Anya, I'll square everything up, full payment, a bonus even, once we weather this storm. This once, for Dad, for the family. Just this once." The phrase hung in the stale, recycled air of the engineering bay, an insidious whisper that promised a temporary reprieve but hinted at an eternal cost. It sounded so innocent, so fleeting, yet even then, in the stark, unforgiving glow of the overhead fluorescence, I felt the jaws of a trap closing around me. Those 4 words, seemingly so innocuous, would prove to be the most expensive I would ever utter. As I stood there, receiver pressed against my ear, the cold dread of an irreversible choice settled deep in my bones. I knew, with a chilling certainty that went beyond logic, that this single, desperate act of familial devotion would demand a price far more devastating than mere financial compensation. It would demand a piece of my soul, and perhaps my future. The promise, whispered like a secret just for me, just this once, was a lie. A beautiful, insidious lie that quickly morphed into a familiar refrain, a new kind of revel in my life, though far less honorable. The very next month, Leo's number flashed on my screen, a little past 7 in the evening, as I was trying to decompress after a grueling day running drills on the flight deck. "He had another urgent issue," he said, his voice laced with the same faux desperation, this time concerning the propulsion system of a different vessel, a crucial component, he emphasized, for a client with deep pockets and even deeper impatience. And then, not long after, it was the design for a corrosion-resistant hull for yet another ship, followed by a mysterious vibration anomaly in a newly installed gearbox. Each call was a fresh theatrical performance, a new crisis unfolding on the other end of the line, always demanding my immediate, undivided attention. My evenings, once dedicated to studying for advanced naval architecture certifications or simply enjoying a quiet dinner with shipmates at the base mess hall, vanished. My weekends, which I'd meticulously planned for intensive deep dive courses in marine engineering or a rare, much-needed trip home to see my family, became mere extensions of my work week. I'd be hunched over my government-issue laptop, the screen casting a pale blue glow across my face in the dim light of my cramped barracks room. My hands, usually calloused from working with heavy machinery, now ached from hours spent typing, sketching intricate diagrams, running complex simulations, and drafting meticulous technical reports. The air in my room, usually stale, grew heavy with the scent of lukewarm coffee and the metallic tang of stress. I was sacrificing everything. Those specialized courses in advanced hydrodynamics and materials science, the very credentials I needed to progress as a naval engineer, to truly make my mark in the service, were constantly pushed to the back burner. No time, I'd tell myself, a bitter taste in my mouth, as I filed away another brochure for a course I couldn't attend. Leo needs this. I saw my peers, my fellow officers, earning their advanced degrees, securing their professional certifications, climbing the ranks with the clear, steady progress of a ship cutting through calm waters. And there I was, caught in a swirling vortex of Leo's making, unable to steer my own course. Sometimes, late into the night, when a wave of exhaustion threatened to pull me under, I'd scroll through social media, a morbid curiosity guiding my thumb. There, plastered across my feed, would be Leo. He'd be lounging by an infinity pool in a luxurious resort in Cabo San Lucas, a tropical cocktail with a tiny umbrella perched in his hand, a smirk on his face. Or he'd be showing off the latest diagnostic equipment for his shop, gleaming chrome and high-tech displays, boasting about his savvy investments. The captions always stung, enjoying the fruits of hard work. "Thanks to all my trusting clients," he'd write, oblivious, or perhaps deliberately cruel, to the irony. Meanwhile, I, a commissioned officer in the United States Navy, was meticulously budgeting every single dollar, often surviving on instant noodles for dinner to stretch my paychecks. The contrast was stark, obscene. Here I was, serving my country, dedicated to a purpose larger than myself, trying to navigate the choppy waters of military life and financial independence. And there he was, flaunting a lavish lifestyle built, brick by brick, on the foundation of my unpaid labor, my expertise, my stolen time. The sheer audacity, the blatant disrespect, was a punch to the gut, a deep, bruising humiliation that festered beneath my disciplined exterior. It was a little before 3 a.m. when the idea struck me, a desperate measure born of frustration and a chilling sense of betrayal. I opened a new Excel spreadsheet on my laptop. Column A, I labeled hours worked for Sharma Marine I. Column B, career goals postponed. I started filling it in, a meticulous, almost clinical record of the slow-motion robbery I was enduring. Cancelled advanced propulsion systems course, delayed home purchase fund, postponed master's degree program application, missed family visits. The list in column B grew longer with each passing week, a silent testament to the insidious cost of Leo's manipulation. That spreadsheet, a cold, hard document of facts and figures hidden deep within my encrypted files, became more than just a ledger. It was my secret archive, a damning dossier of a heist performed not with guns and masks, but with promises and guilt trips, a silent, agonizing theft of my future, meticulously documented, waiting for the day I could present the bill, the tipping point, the moment of undeniable clarity. It didn't come from me. Not directly, anyway. It came from Captain David Chen, my commanding officer, the kind of man whose shadow seemed to stretch longer than most. A steel man, with 20 years of service under his belt, every single one of them earned in the trenches of some global hotspot or the unforgiving steel labyrinth of a carrier's engine room. His eyes, they didn't just look at you. They could bore through walls, through the hardened shell I'd painstakingly constructed around myself. He'd been watching me, I knew. Not in a creepy way, but with that laser-focused precision only a seasoned officer possesses. He saw the way I'd started to fade, a little more each week. My uniform, once a crisp testament to my discipline, now seemed to hang looser. My laughter, once quick and easy, had become a rare, brittle thing. I was growing thinner, quieter, stretched taut like a wire about to snap, and he wasn't missing a beat. He noticed the dark circles under my eyes that even industrial strength concealer couldn't completely mask, the way my shoulders hunched a little more each day, carrying a burden no one else could see. It was a Friday evening, just after most of the base had started their weekend exodus. The air was thick with the promise of liberty, the distant thrum of traffic heading for town. I was at O'Malley's, a dive bar just off base, nursing a single domestic beer, trying to make it last until I could credibly slip away. The place was packed, a symphony of clinking glasses, shouted conversations, and the rhythmic asterisk thwack asterisk of pool balls. That's where he cornered me. Not literally, but he found me tucked away in a booth, half hidden by a particularly rowdy game of darts. He slid into the seat opposite me, his presence a quiet thunderclap even amidst the din. His uniform, as always, was immaculate, his rank gleaming. He ordered a bourbon on the rocks, no fuss, no small talk. He just sat there, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, letting the noise wash over us, letting the unspoken tension build. I could feel the heat of his gaze, even as I pretended to be fascinated by a faded poster on the wall. After what felt like an eternity, he set his glass down, the ice clinking softly, and leaned forward, his voice cutting through the bar's chaotic symphony with surprising clarity, yet devoid of any harshness. "Tell me, Major," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, not a request, but an order. A quiet command that brooked no argument, no evasion. It was the kind of tone that demanded absolute honesty, the kind that reminded you who you were talking to, and who he was. And for the very first time, I did. The entire wretched, draining 4-year-long story of Leo, of his growing needs, of my endless, thankless, secret efforts to prop him up, of the gnawing despair that had become my constant companion, it all poured out. It wasn't a trickle, it was a flood, a torrent of pent-up anger, hurt, and bitter resignation. I spoke through a raw throat, my voice barely a whisper at times, my hands gripping the edge of the sticky table until my knuckles were white. He listened without interruption. His face, usually an open book of authority and quiet confidence, was a mask completely unreadable. No judgment, no surprise, no pity, just a profound stillness. He just watched, his steady gaze absorbing every painful detail, every choked-back sob, every tremor in my voice. When I finally ran out of words, leaving a raw, exposed silence between us that felt louder than the bar's chaotic music, he took a long, slow pull from his beer. He set the bottle down with a decisive asterisk thump asterisk, a sound that seemed to punctuate the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Then he leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his voice a low, steady rumble. "Major," he began, his tone still completely devoid of judgment, but infused with an undeniable, unyielding wisdom. "With all due respect, you can't lie on a grenade to keep others warm. This isn't a crisis you're trying to avert. This is a business model, and you, my friend, are the sole investor." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. A business model. It sounded so cold, so clinical, so utterly devoid of the emotional entanglement that had suffocated me for so long. But it was also undeniably, frighteningly true. He saw it all, the grand deception, the self-sacrificing delusion, laid bare in stark, objective terms. He didn't tell me I was stupid, or weak, or wrong. He simply reframed my entire existence. That night, we didn't go home. We went to his office, the sterile, dimly lit space feeling like a confessional and a courtroom all at once. The air conditioning hummed, a constant, low drone, with a practiced efficiency that spoke volumes of his time in tactical operations. Captain Chen had me pull up every one of Leo's emergencies, every single technical request, every favor I'd ever done for him. And then, with my heart pounding a frantic drum beat against my ribs, we started calculating. He had me list out my solutions, the hours I'd poured into each, the resources I'd leveraged, the opportunities I'd missed. We assigned market values, professional rates, billable hours. My hands began to tremble, a violent, uncontrollable shaking that made it difficult to type, as the number on the captain's desktop calculator grew, mocking me with its relentless ascent. Each click of the keys, each digit added, felt like a nail being driven into my own coffin. The years of quiet sacrifice, the whispered promises, the late nights, the missed promotions, the lost friendships, they coalesced into a cold, hard currency. When the final sum flashed across the screen, a brilliant, terrifying green against the dark background, a wave of nausea washed over me, so potent it felt like I might actually be sick. $240,000. $240,000. It wasn't just a number, it was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. It was 4 years of lost opportunities, 4 years of my prime, 4 years of a future I had so meticulously built for myself, only to systematically dismantle and then, with a perverse selflessness, hand it over to someone else, piece by agonizing piece. Staring at that obscene, undeniable number, a chilling question echoed in the hollow chambers of my mind. reverberating with the force of a battle cry asterisk, what in God's name am I doing with my life asterisk? The answer, when it finally, terribly, blindingly came to me, would change everything. But it would be a slow, arduous crawl out of the darkness, one painful step at a time, each new dawn bringing with it a choice I had long refused to make. Captain Chen's question, the one she'd planted like a well-aimed munition deep in my mind, "What are you doing with your life?" demanded an answer. And that answer couldn't be found in thought or in words. It had to be in action. The next morning, the sun was barely kissing the horizon, painting the sky over the base in hues of bruised purple and angry orange. I was already in my office at Naval Engineering Command, the hum of the ventilation system a familiar, low drone. Cold resolve settled over me, a clarity I hadn't felt since my last deployment, when every decision could mean life or death for my crew. I swung my chair towards my computer. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a slight tremor in them, but my gaze was steady, focused. I drafted an official email to Leo. It was brief, devoid of emotion, a tactical communique. Effective immediately, I typed, each word a hammer blow against years of resentment. I will no longer be providing any pro bono technical consulting services to Sharma Marine. I hit send. There was no going back. Then, as quickly and predictably as a storm following a calm, it began. My phone, sitting innocuously on the corner of my desk, began to detonate. First, it was a voicemail from Leo. His voice, usually smooth and self-assured, was now laced with an uncontrollable fury. "Anya, what the hell are you thinking? Do you have any idea what this irresponsible little stunt of yours is going to cause? You're abandoning the family?" The words, designed to wound, barely registered. I deleted the message then, with a deep breath that felt like shedding a heavy burden. I blocked his number. Next came the calls from the others, Leo's flying monkeys as I'd come to call them in my bitter moments. Aunt Lily, her voice thick with manufactured tears, lamenting Leo's supposed breakdown, how I was tearing everyone's hearts to shreds. "He's practically on the brink, dear," she'd wailed into my voicemail, "and you, his own sister, are pushing him over the edge." Uncle Robert followed with a long, rambling email, lecturing me on the meaning of family duty and honor, citing ancestors I barely remembered. They were using the same old emotional ammunition, the same worn-out guilt trips they'd employed since I was a child. But I was a Navy major now, hardened by real battlefields, by facing down real enemies with real weapons. Their emotional artillery was useless against me. It was like watching a child's firecracker show after you've stood on the deck of a destroyer under enemy fire. Their words just fizzled out, harmless and impotent. I was standing firm at the threshold of my new life, my stance outwardly calm but inwardly resolute. I was in my office, around mid-morning, when a sharp knock startled me. Before I could answer, the door swung open, and there he was, Leo. His face was flushed, his usually meticulously styled hair slightly disheveled. His eyes, normally calculating, now held a desperate, cornered animal look. He must have driven straight here the moment he couldn't reach me, probably guessing I'd blocked him. The audacity was breathtaking. "Anya," he began, his voice low and dangerous, a contrast to the voicemail, trying to regain his usual manipulative charm. "We need to talk. What is this nonsense?" He gestured vaguely towards my computer, as if the email itself was an illusion. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, my expression unyielding. "My duty to this family," I stated, my voice clear and steady, each word measured, "does not include self-immolation to keep you warm, Leo. It does not demand the financial and professional destruction of my own life." I held his gaze, refusing to let him intimidate me. His eyes flickered, surprised by my unwavering resolve, by the steel he hadn't seen in me before. "I am not abandoning the family," I clarified, letting the weight of the truth settle between us. "I am simply refusing to abandon myself anymore." I took a deliberate step backward, then pulled the office door wider, an unmistakable gesture of dismissal. "You need to leave now." My voice was as crisp and final as a command given on the bridge, leaving no room for argument or negotiation. Leo stood there for a long moment, frozen, his mouth slightly agape, before a shadow of something I couldn't quite decipher: defeat, perhaps, or a simmering new resentment crossed his face. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving the scent of desperation and stale cologne lingering in the air. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing a chapter, but I knew, with a certainty honed by years of anticipating enemy maneuvers, that this was far from the end of the battle. It was merely the declaration of war. The air in my apartment had been thick with the ghosts of shouted words and shattered illusions for what felt like an eternity after Leo stormed out. He left a gaping hole, not just where he used to stand, but in the carefully constructed facade of my life. For weeks, the silence was almost louder than the confrontation itself, a constant echo of betrayal and my own foolish trust. I moved through my days at the base like a phantom, present in body but distant in spirit, haunted by the images of his cunning smile and the chill of his manipulation. The next 6 months were a relentless campaign of reconstruction. It wasn't just about piecing back together my shredded bank account, which had become a casualty of Leo's financial machinations, but about reclaiming my very sense of self. Every penny I meticulously saved, every investment I reviewed with a grim determination, felt like another brick laid in the foundation of my independence. The wounds Leo inflicted weren't visible, not like a gash or a bruise, but they festered deep within, a constant, dull ache that reminded me of my vulnerability. Then came the day that felt like a turning point, not just for my career, but for my soul. I was awarded the Navy Commendation Medal for my superior contributions to the development of our new sonar system. It was a formal affair, held on the main parade ground, the crisp California morning, air snapping with the ceremonial flags. The weight of the medal, cool against my chest, was substantial, a tangible acknowledgement of hard work and genuine achievement. The promotion ceremony followed, a blur of polished boots and sharp salutes. The chief commander, a colonel whose reputation for both stern discipline and unwavering fairness preceded him, stood before me. He was a man carved from granite, with eyes that saw through pretense, and a jawline that spoke of countless battles fought and won. With a precise, almost surgical movement, he affixed the rank insignia of a captain to my uniform. His voice, a deep baritone, boomed across the assembled personnel, carrying over the rhythmic slap of the flag against its pole. He read the official commendation, a litany of my achievements for exceptional technical prowess in engineering innovative solutions, for exemplary leadership during multiple challenging deployments, and for unwavering dedication to the Corps and its mission. The words were formal, official, yet they resonated with a truth that Leo's empty flatteries had never possessed. These were facts, verifiable truths, earned through countless hours under the unforgiving sun, through the pressure of critical decisions made under duress, through the grit and grind of naval life. After the official pronouncement, as the last echoes of his voice faded, the colonel extended his hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. Then he leaned in, his voice dropping to a low rumble meant only for my ears, a private whisper amidst the public fanfare. "We're proud of you, Captain," he said, his gaze meeting mine with an intensity that held genuine respect, both in and out of uniform. That simple, understated recognition, coming from a man whose respect had to be earned, limb by limb, sacrifice by sacrifice, meant more than any grand declaration I had ever heard in Leo's pristine, deceptive home. It was validation built on genuine merit, on substance, not on the slippery, shifting sands of manipulation. I walked off that parade ground that morning, with a posture straighter than I had realized it could be, the weight of my new rank, a comfortable embrace, not a burden. It was as if every fiber of my being, bruised and battered by recent betrayals, had somehow been realigned. I began to systematically rebuild my savings, meeting with a financial advisor on base, a retired gunnery sergeant who specialized in helping transitioning military personnel navigate the complexities of civilian finance. He understood the unique challenges we faced, the way our lives were structured, and the unexpected traps that could ensnare us once we stepped off the well-trodden path of military life. With his guidance, I started to map out a future where my financial stability was entirely my own making, untouchable by external forces, a bulwark against future storms. My true support network, my chosen family, solidified around me like an unbreakable shield. Captain Chen, with his gruff exterior and heart of gold, along with the other personnel in my unit, had pieced together the story. Barracks rumors, whispered observations during long night shifts, and the keen intuition of those who had served alongside me formed a picture of what I had endured. They didn't offer pity, which I would have rejected outright. Instead, they offered solidarity, a silent, powerful agreement that what happened was an injustice, and that I was not alone. One crisp Saturday afternoon, I found myself being herded into a van after our morning drills. "We're going on an excursion," Captain Chen announced, his eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint. It turned out to be a surprise BBQ at Del Mar Beach, the salty air and the roaring Pacific a stark contrast to the sterile confines of the base. The smell of grilled burgers and hot dogs, the easy laughter of my comrades, the casual jostling and the clinking of beer bottles, it was a scene of pure, unadulterated belonging. Captain Chen, his arm heavy and reassuring across my shoulders, handed me a cold beer, the condensation cool against my palm. "In the military," he said, his voice a low growl, rough around the edges but warm at its core, "we never leave a soldier to fight alone. Not overseas, and certainly not at home." Standing there, the roar of the Pacific Ocean, the primal symphony behind me, the joyful shouts of my teammates filling the air, I felt a sense of belonging, a profound connection that I had unwittingly avoided my entire life, chasing after the hollow promises of a life that was never truly mine. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the crushing weight in my chest eased. But even as the laughter echoed around me, a part of me knew that this was just the beginning. Rebuilding my spirit was one thing, confronting the lingering shadows, the deep-seated fears that Leo had planted, was another battle entirely. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that battle was still very much ahead. The last piece of the mending process came from the most unexpected place, a quiet evening that had settled into the familiar hum of my small apartment, a piece I'd painstakingly built after the chaos. My phone buzzed, startling me out of the comfortable silence, the screen displaying an unfamiliar Los Angeles area code. My first instinct, honed by years of self-preservation, was to let it go to voicemail. I'd become adept at filtering out the ghosts of my past, but something, a tiny, insistent whisper of intuition that felt like a familiar pang in my gut from a deployment where every instinct meant survival, made me answer. "Anya?" The voice on the other end was a hesitant, fragile thing, barely a whisper against the static. It took a beat, a moment of processing, for me to recognize it. Priya. My sister. The sound of her voice, so long unheard in anything but accusatory echoes, was like a strange artifact from a forgotten time, a relic from a life I'd thought was irrevocably lost. "I'm so sorry, Anya," she stammered, her words barely coherent through what sounded like suppressed tears, each syllable heavy with a regret that felt almost physical, even across hundreds of miles. "I've been thinking so much since that night at the party. I talked to Leo. I cornered him. He admitted it. He admitted everything." She recounted the confrontation, a vivid, painful scene unfolding in my mind's eye. After I'd stormed out of that disastrous gathering, a whirlwind of betrayal and accusation, Priya, surprisingly, hadn't let it rest. It hadn't been easy, she confessed. Leo, ever the master of manipulation, had put on his usual theatrical performance, the indignant denials, the counter-accusations painting me as the aggressor, and of course, his special brand of crocodile tears, a deluge designed to drown out any inconvenient truth. But Priya, the relentless marketing professional, usually so focused on her own polished world, had shown a bulldog tenacity I'd never seen. She'd pressed him, hounded him with questions, dissecting his flimsy excuses, until the cracks in his carefully constructed facade became a gaping chasm, and the ugly, unvarnished truth spilled out undeniable. She wasn't just apologizing for her past blindness, but for her own complicity, for being part of the machine that had ground me down. It was clear she'd done her own hard reckoning, not just cornered Leo, but also looked deep into her own role in our fractured family narrative. "I was so blind," Priya confessed, her voice thick with a shame that was almost palpable. I was too busy with my own career, too busy being the golden child. Too busy believing the narrative that you were the problem, the troubled one, the one who always caused friction. I never stopped to truly look at what Leo had been doing to you. I'm so sorry I believed his lies. I'm so sorry I wasn't a real sister. The pressure of being the golden child, the perfect daughter, the successful marketer, had evidently warped her own vision, making her accept Leo's convenient lies about me as easily as she'd accept a fabricated marketing statistic. Her apology, late as it was, wasn't just words. It was a chisel chipping away at a wall of ice around my heart that I hadn't even realized was there. A thick, impenetrable barrier I'd built brick by bitter brick to protect myself from the chill of their neglect. Now, it began to crack, a slow, almost imperceptible thawing. We talked for well over an hour, our first real conversation in what felt like decades. It was halting and difficult, punctuated by long, heavy silences filled with the ghosts of unspoken resentments, but it was honest, bracingly, brutally honest. Each shared silence felt like a bridge slowly forming across a canyon of years, built of finally acknowledged pain. It was like a demilitarized zone suddenly opening up for dialogue, fraught with tension but holding the promise of peace. I could hear the weariness in her voice, the emotional exhaustion, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something akin to empathy for her. And in that raw honesty, a fragile spark of hope flickered, a tiny ember in the ashes of our relationship, promising the possibility of warmth again. Then, just as we were about to hang up, the conversation taking on a lighter, almost tentative tone, she let slip another piece of news, an unexpected detail shared in a moment of frustrated exasperation, like a loose bolt finally rattling free in a worn engine. "They never change Anya," she said with an exasperated sigh, the sound carrying even through the phone line, thick with a weary resignation that mirrored my own. "Can you believe it? Leo's planning a huge client appreciation gala. He's invited the entire family, all the major partners, the whole 9 yards, the usual lavish Sharma Marine spectacle. And guess what the theme is?" I waited, a cold dread beginning to crawl along my spine, like the first tendrils of a gas leak seeping into a sealed compartment, threatening to ignite. A knot tightened in my stomach, the world tilting slightly on its axis, preparing to shift, to honor Leo for developing Sharma Marine's new breakthrough marine engineering system. The phone line went silent. My own breath hitched in my throat, refusing to escape. I couldn't speak. The shock was deeper, more devastating than Leo's snide, calculated words about me being incompetent. Those had been wounds, deep and painful, but external. This was an amputation, a severance of my very essence. This wasn't just an insult hurled in a moment of anger. This wasn't just the casual neglect that had become a hallmark of their affection. This was erasure. Pure, unadulterated obliteration. They were publicly rewriting history, scrubbing me clean from the narrative as if I'd never existed. The image of Leo, sleek in a tuxedo, basking under the spotlight, accepting accolades for my asterisk innovation, while I was relegated to the shadows, unacknowledged, uninvited, was a venomous visual. It wasn't just stealing intellectual property, it was grand larceny of my identity, a public desecration of my very being. This new breakthrough marine engineering system wasn't just a project, it was my blood, sweat, and the sacrifice of my youth. I could still smell the hydraulic fluid, feel the vibration of the engines under my boots, taste the metallic tang of sea air, mixed with my own exhaustion after a 20-hour shift debugging a subsystem. All those tangible memories, all those years of dedication below deck, the missed holidays and family milestones, the entire trajectory of my life molded by that system, all of it stolen, erased, and rebranded for a corporate trophy. They were turning me into a ghost in my own story, a phantom figure whose efforts were now conveniently attributed to their golden boy. They were crowning Leo for a victory he never fought, never bled for, never truly understood beyond a boardroom presentation. They were declaring him the conqueror of a battle I had waged alone in the depths of the ocean, a battle no one else would ever know the true cost of. A cold, controlled rage, the kind I had only ever felt deep in the gut during a combat drill gone live. When the stakes were life and death and clarity was paramount, flared in my chest. This wasn't the blind fury of a young recruit, but the seasoned, calculated anger of a senior petty officer. It was the kind of rage that made you calm, focused, strategic. The kind that made you analyze the enemy's movements, identify their weaknesses, and plan a counter-assault with surgical precision. This wasn't about lashing out. It was about dismantling. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could rewrite history. My 4 years of service had taught me about truth, about integrity, about holding the line, even when every fiber of your being screamed for retreat. This wasn't a family feud anymore. It was an undeclared war, a campaign for justice and validation, and I was just beginning to draw up my battle plans. The gloves were off, the safety was disengaged, and the target was clear. Just a few days after my conversation with Priya, the fragile hope we'd cautiously built was obliterated. I was reviewing personnel files in my office when my phone buzzed with a message from an old Marine buddy. "Hey, isn't this your family's shop? Your sister must be doing great." Attached was a picture. I tapped to open it, and for a split second, my heart stopped. The photo was of the familiar family boat repair shop, adorned with a massive, gaudy banner, the kind you'd see at an automotive dealership grand opening. The letters, bold white on royal blue, were unmistakable congratulations, Leo, visionary of breakthrough marine engineering systems, honoring Sharma Marine. I stared at the photo, the phone growing cold in my hand. The rage that ignited within me wasn't hot and chaotic. It was ice. It was a cold, sharp, crystal-clear anger that carried with it a terrifying clarity. They had done the unforgivable. They had taken their private lie and erected a public monument to it. This was no longer a slight. This was a public execution of the truth. But I didn't crumble. I didn't cry. Major Anya Sharma had taken over. I shifted into operational mode. I swiveled my chair to my government-issued laptop and began what the military calls intelligence gathering. This was no longer a messy family dispute. It was a mission to unearth the truth. The objective was to build an ironclad case. I logged into my accounts and started the methodical process of downloading 4 years of blueprints, emails, and correspondence records concerning Sharma Marine projects. I screenshotted every desperate message from Leo, every empty promise of compensation, every guilt-laden manipulation. I wasn't just collecting data, I was organizing it. I chronologically arranged everything into a secure folder, creating a damning timeline of their 4-year campaign of intellectual and emotional exploitation. This was no longer a collection of bitter memories. It was an archive of evidence. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was an investigation. I was no longer a hurt sister. I was an officer preparing a post-action report, and I would present it with brutal precision. As I was compiling the final documents, my phone rang again. It was Priya, her voice a frantic, indignant torrent. "Anya, I swear I didn't know anything about that banner." She blurted out, not even waiting for me to say hello. "I just saw it on Aunt Carol's Facebook page." She posted a picture with the caption, "So proud of my nephew Leo." I feel sick. I called Leo, and he tried to gaslight me, saying it was just a small misunderstanding. He's telling everyone I helped him so much to develop these solutions. He's using my name, my career, to sell this lie. "Anya, he's making me an accomplice." The shame and fury in her voice were palpable. She was being used too, just in a different way. In that moment, a decision solidified in my mind, cold and absolute. I was no longer on defense. It was time to attack. "Don't do anything, Priya," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Don't call them. Don't post anything. Just act normal." "What, Anya? I have to." "No," I cut her off, the command in my voice silencing her. "This weekend I'm coming to San Diego. I'm coming to that gala." A stunned silence. "Are you sure?" she finally asked, her voice a whisper. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied. The moment I hung up, I was on the airline's website, booking a one-way ticket from John Wayne Airport to San Diego. I packed only a carry-on. I didn't pack cocktail dresses or party clothes. Instead, I carefully selected my sharpest power suit, a crisp charcoal blazer, and matching trousers I'd always referred to as my Navy business suit. It was my uniform for this new kind of battle. My leather attaché case didn't contain toiletries. It held my laptop, a portable printer, and a thick, meticulously organized and tabbed binder of documents. It was a weapon of truth. As I sat on the plane, watching the sprawling Southern California suburbs slide beneath the clouds, I felt no fear. There was no anxiety, no nervous knot in my stomach. Just a profound, comprehensive clarity. This was my mission. I was not flying home as a victim seeking pity or an apology. I was not the broken sister looking for a moment of reconciliation. I was returning as Captain Anya Sharma of the United States Navy, and I was on my way to enforce an unnegotiable code of conduct and restore order based on a value that had been trampled and discarded the truth. If you've ever had to gather evidence yourself, just to prove you weren't crazy, hit the like button and tell me in the comments, in just one word, what weapon you'd bring to a battle for your own truth, or feelings. A gala reunion, stress. Touching down in San Diego this time felt different. I wasn't coming home. I was deploying to a forward operating base. I bypassed the familiar route to my parents' neighborhood and instead checked into an anonymous downtown business hotel. My room, with its neutral tones and bland efficiency, immediately became my command center. There was no time to waste. I didn't open my clothes luggage. I opened my mission luggage. I connected my laptop to the room's large flat-screen TV with an HDMI cable, turning it into a giant monitor to review my intelligence. The evidence I'd gathered, the blueprints, emails, correspondence records, was no longer a chaotic collection of painful memories. It was raw data, and my job was to refine it into an irrefutable narrative, a prosecutorial argument. I knew I couldn't walk into that party and just start shouting. An emotional outburst would be dismissed as hysteria. I had to be colder, more methodical. I had to present my case with the undeniable logic of an officer, briefing a general. My feelings were irrelevant. The truth was everything. I spent the entire afternoon building my weapon. It wasn't a rifle. It was a PowerPoint presentation. This was my battlefield and the slides were my ammunition. I created a title slide, the text stark and official, on a simple black background: Operation Family Support, a 48-month engineering post-action assessment presented by Captain Anya Sharma. Each slide was constructed with the precision of an intelligence analyst. I didn't just list numbers, I visualized them. One slide featured a bar graph clearly illustrating the values of my engineering designs contributed over time, showing how a one-time request had metastasized into a chronic dependency. Another slide was a communication log featuring a timeline of Leo's emails and requests. Their emotional content starkly contrasted with his professional demands. Before finalizing the presentation, I made a call, not to a friend, but to a contact at the base's legal services office. I didn't need litigation. I needed to be precise. I spent 20 minutes on the phone with a sharp young Navy JAG lawyer clarifying the language I should use. I wasn't accusing them of a crime, but I wanted my words to carry the weight of legal accuracy. We discussed terms like technical specifications, verbal commitments, and request for samples. The consultation armed me with a new layer of authority. The deadliest slide, the one I spent the most time on, I titled Discrepancy Analysis. It was a simple 2-column layout. On the left, I pasted screenshots of Leo's desperate pleas for help. The navigation system is failing. We need a new schematic by tomorrow. The boat engine is completely shot. It's a disaster! We can't afford equipment this week. Anya! On the right, paralleling each plea, I pasted corresponding evidence from Leo's social media. Beside the navigation system plea was a photo of Leo sitting in a luxury yacht cabin with an expensive watch, posted that same week. Next to the broken boat was a picture of Leo at a San Diego Padres baseball game in a VIP suite, and beside the claim that they couldn't afford equipment was a photo of him dining at Mr. A's, one of San Diego's priciest restaurants, with the city lights sparkling below. It was a brutal, undeniable side-by-side depiction of their lies. Late that afternoon, there was a soft knock at the door. It was Priya. It was the first time we'd seen each other in person in months, and the air was thick with unspoken histories. There were no awkward hugs. Her gaze went immediately to the TV screen where my discrepancy analysis slide was displayed. She sucked in a sharp breath, her face hardening. "Oh my God," she whispered, shaking her head. "They won't know what hit them." She became my strategic advisor. For the next hour, we were no longer sisters caught in a family drama. We were a legal team preparing for a hearing. She paced the hotel room, offering suggestions with the rapid-fire precision of a paralegal. "Don't refer to him as Brother Leo in the presentation," she advised, her voice sharp. "Call them by their first names. It creates a professional and emotional distance. It signals you're no longer operating as a member of their family." She pulled out her phone and reviewed the party's guest list, confirming who would be present. She helped me identify potential allies like Aunt Judith, Leo's older sister, a stern, no-nonsense woman who valued integrity above all else. We also flagged the inevitable loyalists who would defend Leo and the family no matter what. We were mapping the terrain, assessing loyalties. We were a united front, an alliance forged in the crucible of truth. That evening, after Priya left, I didn't go out. The city buzzed with life below my window. But my world had narrowed to this room, this mission. I called room service, a simple club sandwich and a bottle of water. I performed my pre-battle rituals. I took out my black leather dress shoes and polished them until they gleamed, using the same circular motions I'd used on my issued combat boots. I carefully pressed my charcoal suit, ensuring every crease was sharp, every line perfect. Each action was a meditation, a way to focus my mind and steady my nerves. I didn't need to rehearse the presentation. The slides, the facts, the story. It was all burned into my memory. I stood before the full-length mirror by the closet. I looked at my reflection, not with criticism or doubt, but with a quiet assessment. I didn't see the overlooked sister. I didn't see the soldier on duty. I saw a whole human being. A woman who had been broken down and rebuilt, stronger and more resilient than before. A woman ready to reclaim her own narrative. I took one last deep breath. It was time. I walked into that party like a soldier entering hostile territory. The ballroom was packed with the familiar faces of my extended family, a sea of relatives chattering gleefully, utterly unaware. At the center of it all, holding court near the fireplace, were Leo and his family. He was radiant, basking in the compliments and congratulations. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the clinking of wine glasses. It was their perfect stage, and they were the stars. The moment they saw me, their smiles faltered for a fraction of a second before being pasted back on, wider and faker than before. "Anya, darling, what a surprise!" "You came without telling us," Leo chirped, rushing forward to engulf me in a cloud of Chanel No. 5. He reached for a hug, the classic maneuver to draw me into the charade. I took a deliberate step back. It was a small movement, but a definitive rejection. His arms fell awkwardly. "I came to honor," I said, my voice cold and even just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Ignoring his startled expression, I walked directly to the large flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace, the focal point of their stage. With calm, practiced movements, I opened my attaché case, took out my laptop and HDMI cable, and began connecting it to the TV. A subtle shift rippled through the room. Conversations near me sputtered to a halt. The background laughter seemed to recede as people began to turn their heads. A distinct tension began to seep into the festive atmosphere, a silent question mark hanging in the air. Leo, oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant, chose that moment to begin the main event. He raised his champagne glass high. "Friends, family," he began, his voice booming. "Tonight we are here to honor a truly remarkable individual, a man whose success and generosity have saved this family." It was my cue. "Forgive me for interrupting," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and resonant, cutting through his speech like a blade. Every eye in the room pivoted to me. "Before the celebration begins, I have a few truths to present." Leo stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. Before he could object, I pressed a key on my laptop. The TV screen flickered to life, bathing the silent room in cold digital light. The title slide appeared, stark and unadorned. Operation Family Support. A 48-month engineering post-action assessment. A deathly silence descended upon the room. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. Leo's face was a mask of dawning horror. My mother's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. Ignoring them, I began. I clicked to the first slide. My voice was calm, methodical, the voice of an officer delivering a report. This operation began on February 15, 2020, and concluded 48 months later. I presented the data without emotion, without accusation, the bar charts detailing my engineering contributions, the communication logs with Leo's requests, the brutal juxtaposition of his pleas for help and his lavish social media posts. I didn't raise my voice. I wasn't angry. I simply presented the evidence, letting the cold, hard facts speak for themselves. The truth was my only weapon. Leo finally broke, his voice trembling with fury. This is hard to take, Anya. This is family business. I turned from the screen and looked him squarely in the eye, my gaze unyielding. Truth is truth, Leo, I replied, using his first name as Priya had advised. The effect was immediate. It stripped him of his authority. Whether it's shameful or not is entirely dependent on one's actions. I clicked to the final slide, the coup de grace. The image that had started it all filled the screen, the gaudy blue and white banner. The photo was high resolution. Every word was crystal clear. This banner, I said, my voice resounding with finality in the silent room, is a public lie. I turned my gaze to Priya. She stood motionless near the bar, her face pale with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension as she stared at the screen, finally understanding the true scale of the deception. Leo did not save this shop, I declared, my voice ringing with 4 years of suppressed truth. Leo's successful business career did not fund his lifestyle. My salary and my intellect, as a U.S. naval officer, did that. I pointed a finger at Leo. You shut up! Leo screamed, his carefully constructed composure finally crumbling. You ungrateful. But it was too late. The truth was out. The bomb had detonated, and the fallout was inevitable. The carefully cultivated image he had spent a lifetime building had just been annihilated in front of his entire family. In the stunned, echoing silence, a single sharp sound cut through the air. Smack! It was Aunt Judith, Leo's older sister. She was a formidable woman, a retired school principal whom everyone in the family respected and was a little afraid of. She slowly, deliberately, rose to her feet. Smack, smack. Well, she said, her voice dry and laced with a flinty hardness as she looked directly at Leo. It's high time someone enforced some discipline in this family. Her eyes, full of profound disappointment, were all Leo needed to realize his sentence. And then something even more powerful happened. From across the room, Priya began to move. She walked with quiet, determined grace, gliding past the frozen statues of our relatives. She passed Leo, who stood there, utterly deflated and exposed. She didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on me. She stopped right beside me, shoulder to shoulder. In front of everyone, she placed her hand on my arm. A silent, unshakable gesture of solidarity. It was a seismic shift in the family landscape. A transfer of loyalty from the old regime built on lies to a new generation aligned with the truth. We stood there together, facing them. No longer the golden child and the scapegoat, just two women, two sisters, standing on the right side of history. After Priya and I walked out of that silent, devastated ballroom, we didn't say a word. We just got into her car and drove. The adrenaline that had fueled my presentation drained away, leaving a profound, bone-deep weariness. The feeling of victory wasn't the sweet, triumphant exhilaration I might have expected. It was a hollow ache. It was the feeling a soldier gets after a long and brutal battle. A quiet, melancholy exhaustion. I had won the war for truth, but the cost was the final devastation of any illusions I had left about a whole and happy family. In the days that followed, the aftershocks began. My phone started to buzz again, but this time the messages were different. No more accusations, no more pressure. Instead, there were tentative texts and voicemails from aunts and uncles, cousins. I'm so sorry, Anya. One text from my Aunt read. We never knew. Another from a cousin said, I had no idea. I'm just in shock. I read them and then deleted them. I didn't reply. I appreciated the sentiment, but I didn't need their belated sympathy. I didn't need validation from the very people who had quietly watched me become invisible for years. More than anything, I just needed quiet. I needed to process the magnitude of the chasm I had created between my life. A week later, as Priya and I sat at a small, beachfront cafe in Ensenada, watching surfers ride the waves, another kind of aftershock arrived. It was an email Priya forwarded to me from Leo's lawyer. It was formal, cold, and utterly clueless. It was an offer as a gesture of reconciliation and goodwill. They offered to compensate me for my past contributions by adding my name to the deed of the shop. I read the email on my phone and let out a short, bitter laugh. I showed Priya the screen. "They still don't understand," I said, shaking my head as I watched a pelican dive into the sea. "After all of that, they still think this is about money. They think they can buy my silence, buy my loyalty with a piece of paper. They thought they could solve a problem of the heart with a real estate transaction." Priya put her coffee cup down, her expression serious, and her eyes filled with a sincerity I hadn't seen since we were children. "Then, let me do it," she said softly. "Let me pay you back, Anya. All of it. The full $240,000. I can liquidate some stocks. I can." I reached across the table and placed my hand on hers, stopping her. "No, Priya," I said gently. "I don't need it." She looked genuinely confused. "But it's your future. Your down payment, your transition fund. You said it yourself." "No," I said, my voice firm with a newfound clarity. "My future is what I build for myself starting now." I squeezed her hand. "What you needed wasn't money. You'd taken care of yourself for years. You were going to be fine. What you needed was for the truth to be heard. What you needed was someone to stand with you." I looked her straight in the eyes, letting her see the profound gratitude I felt. "And you gave me that, Priya. When you walked across that room and stood beside me, for me, that act was worth more than $240,000. That was enough." Tears welled up in her eyes and in mine. For the first time, we weren't seeing each other through the distorted lens of parental favoritism and assigned roles. We were just two sisters seeing each other for who we truly were, bound by a shared painful truth and the tentative hope of a new beginning. That night, back in my quiet hotel room before my flight back to base, I knew there was one last thing I had to do. One final line to draw. I wouldn't call Leo. A phone call would lead to arguments, tears, and more manipulation. This needed to be a final, definitive statement. I sat down and wrote a short, formal letter, not to Leo, but to his lawyer, ensuring the message would be delivered without any emotional filter. The letter was concise. "I have received your offer, and I reject it. I am not asking for my name on the deed to that shop. Nor am I asking for anything else from you. My fight was never about property. It was about truth. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. This forgiveness is a gift I give to myself, not to you. It is the act of releasing a prisoner and realizing that the prisoner was myself. My boundaries, however, are now clear and non-negotiable. This is the last contact you will receive from me. Please do not attempt to contact me again. Goodbye." I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and arranged for it to be delivered to the law firm the following morning. The moment I sent the final confirmation email, I felt the last, heaviest burden lift from my soul. The battle was finally over. The aftershocks had settled. I had closed the book on the longest, most painful chapter of my life. It was a sad, lonely act, but also the most liberating thing I had ever done. 1 year later, that final letter I wrote marked not just the end of a painful chapter. It was the beginning of an entirely new book. After much soul-searching, I made a bold decision. I submitted my honorable discharge papers from the Navy, choosing to leave on my own terms with my head held high. A major defense tech company in Seattle had made me an offer to be their new executive director, and I accepted. The change of scenery was absolute, a deliberate baptism into a new life. I traded the sunny deserts of Southern California for the verdant hills of the Pacific Northwest. I used the savings I had finally been able to accrue along with my hard-earned VA loan benefits to buy a small but beautiful condo in a quiet neighborhood with a balcony overlooking the majestic, snow-capped peak of Mount Rainier. My life found a new, peaceful rhythm. No more emergency calls late at night, no more financial worries that weren't my own. No more walking on eggshells. My days were filled with challenging, meaningful work, leveraging the logistical skills I had honed in the military. My weekends were filled with long hikes through misty pine forests, the crisp, clean air in my lungs. My evenings were spent in quiet solitude, reading by the fireplace with a cup of tea. The silence no longer felt empty, but full of peace. But I knew this new life couldn't be just about my own comfort. The pain I had endured wasn't meaningless. It had forged me into a stronger, wiser person. It had taught me a lesson I felt compelled to share. Every Saturday morning, I drove south to a veteran resource center in Tacoma. There, in a small, unassuming conference room, I volunteered to lead a workshop I created myself. I called it Operation Financial Independence. My audience was young service members, sailors, airmen, and Marines. Many of them were just like I had been, full of honor, duty, and loyalties that were easy to exploit. I taught them the basics. How to budget on a military salary, how to understand their VA loan benefits, how to plan for their future. But the most important part of the workshop was the final module. It was the one I called Cover Your Six, military slang for being vigilant. In that module, I taught them how to recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation, especially when it came from the people they trusted most, their own families. I gave them the language to set firm, healthy boundaries. I shared my own story, not with bitterness or anger, but with the calm strength of a survivor. I told them that their duty to family didn't require them to sacrifice their own future. I told them that a request for help and a demand for a blank check were two very different things. And I watched a quiet understanding dawn in their eyes, the same understanding that had taken me years of pain to acquire. My deepest wound had become my greatest strength. My personal battle had become my public mission. My relationship with Priya, once a source of quiet resentment, had blossomed into the truest friendship of my life. She flew up from LA to visit me nearly every month. We hiked around Mount Rainier. We cooked together in my small kitchen. We talked about everything and nothing. We had rebuilt our sisterhood on a new foundation, one of absolute honesty and mutual respect. She had become my best friend, the ally I had always wished for. We didn't talk much about Leo. We didn't need to. His chapter was closed. Our future was ours to write together. The story ends here on a quiet Tuesday morning. I'm standing on my balcony, a warm mug of coffee in my hands. The air is fresh and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I'm watching the first rays of dawn creep across the horizon, painting the snow-capped peak of Mount Rainier in soft pinks and brilliant golds. It's a new day, a self-made dawn. I step inside, open a fresh journal, and on the pristine first page, I write the opening line to the next chapter of my life, Year 1 of a life of freedom. I had fought many battles in my career as a naval officer, but I had finally won the most important one, the battle for my own life, my own honor, and my own future. I was no longer a soldier taking orders. I was the commanding officer of my own destiny. Finally, in the quiet peace of this new morning, I was truly home.